Schwartz is stunned, having not realized when Mac had moved behind him. Mac gets close to Schwartz, puts a hand on his shoulder, and tells him that Schwartz is nothing like everyone else who simply follows the pecking order. He acknowledges that Schwartz has the guts to call out something he deems out of place. Mac adds that it's an excellent quality to have during wartime. Then he suddenly attacks Schwartz, declaring that someone like Schwartz has no place in an age of peace. After Schwartz is killed, Mac walks back to the throne and sits down, asking if anyone else has any objections before they continue. Seeing Mac's killing intent, everyone becomes frightened and falls silent. Suddenly, a girl named Marie tries to speak up, saying she has a report for the Majesty. Marie, the Chief of National Security, smiles at Mac and asks what he would like to know. She first apologizes for bringing bad news, explaining that the security team has failed to secure Princess Veronica in Thikar. Marie informs them that Princess Veronica has escaped and her current whereabouts are unknown. She expresses her fear that Veronica might be making her way back to the kingdom as they speak. Hearing this, everyone in the crowd is surprised. Mac notes that it sounds like a serious issue and asks Flora what they should do. Flora, however, looks very angrily at Marie. Seeing Flora's angry gaze, Marie becomes scared and starts shaking. Flora then asks, "What about it?" Marie responds tensely, saying she was just making her report. Flora shouts that she doesn't need any reports. What she wants are results and only results. She tells Marie that if she can't accomplish such a simple mission, she might as well find someone else to fill Marie's role. Hearing this, Marie is fully stunned. In fear, she bows before Flora and says she will immediately arrange for another pursuit team. She pleads with Flora for one more chance. Mac laughs, saying that it was quite the show. Flora assures him that it is no mere performance, as she will absolutely not allow Veronica to succeed to the throne. The scene shifts to Liddy and Veronica, who are out fishing. Veronica is struggling to catch any fish, prompting Yido to tell her to give up, as not everyone is a natural-born fisher. Veronica asks Yido if he's suggesting that she's hopeless when it comes to fishing. In reality, she has only a level 1 fishing skill. Veronica shares that she believes the key to being a successful fisher is patience, mentioning that she read about it in a book, so she knows. Yido then asks why she doesn't take a glance at Liddy's haul. When Veronica looks over, she is surprised to see that Liddy has caught so many fish. Liddy happily says that he reeled in a lot, crediting his success to his fishing skill, which is at level 76. On top of that, Liddy also found a lot of fruits using his gathering skill, which is at level 71. He then cooked the food with his cooking skill, which is at level 88. Liddy made a dish called longtail fish aqua pazza with lots of vegetables, along with a vegetable soup. He then asked both Veronica and Yido to dig in. Seeing the dish, both Yido and Veronica were amazed, and after eating, they praised it for being very delicious. Liddy replied that he was glad they liked it. Yido curiously asked where Liddy had learned to cook something like this. Liddy replied that he was mostly in charge of food in the hero's party. Liddy also shared that it really took him back, as they used to cook with whatever they could find during their journey. Everyone had their own unique tastes, so it was tough preparing the right meal for each person. Sometimes he would secretly add a bit of their disliked foods to make sure they had a balanced diet. Yido, surprised, asked Liddy, what was he, their nanny? Liddy replied that he was sure Veronica would get better at fishing if she stuck with it. Yido said he didn't know that. Veronica responded that she used to love staying inside the castle all day. Veronica shared that she used to read books, study on her own, and pretend to be a mage, but Flora was her complete opposite. Flora loved going out and exploring the outside world. Veronica also shared that sometimes Flora would invite her to sneak out of the castle, and they would end up getting scolded together. Veronica was sure that if Flora were with her, she would have become an excellent fisher in no time. Veronica's eyes filled with tears as she said she really wanted to meet Flora. Yido was surprised to see her like this, while Liddy gently placed a hand on her shoulder and reassured her, saying, "Don't worry, you'll see Flora soon." Liddy even promised Veronica that he would take her home after all. Hearing this, Veronica was impressed and kept looking at Liddy. Yido also reminded Veronica not to forget that she had his help too. Veronica was very happy and apologized to both of them for worrying them. She then shared that she had decided that no matter what stood in their way, she was going to meet Flora one more time. The scene then shifted to later in the evening when Liddy and Veronica finally reached Xavier Mountain. Liddy pointed and asked everyone to take a look at it. Yido responded that Liddy was acting like there was only one mountain, but there were so many. He asked which one it was since they all looked the same to him. Liddy tensely replied, "What? Just look closely. It should be clear which one is Xavier Mountain." It has this sparkling aura around it because Xavier Mountain is the hometown of Mr. Demoness, the warrior of the heroes' party. Liddy added that it couldn't be wrong to call it a historical landmark. At that moment, Yido looked confused because he couldn't see any aura. Liddy was very happy and shared that he never thought he would get a chance to see Xavier Mountain so soon. Suddenly, Yido became tense for some reason and urgently asked Liddy to wait. Yido urged Liddy not to say that Xavier Mountain was actually home to a nest of dragons. Liddy responded firmly, saying no, as there shouldn't be any dragons in the Xavier Mountain area. But Yido pointed towards the dragons and asked if they were coming toward them. Veronica curiously asked Yido if it could be that those dragons were his friends. Yido furiously shouted, "No, of course not," and asked Veronica not to lump him in with those low-class monsters. He then explained that those creatures were winged drakes and that they weren't very intelligent, so they couldn't even have a conversation with those dragons. Yido added that winged drakes were the only type of dragon that acted in packs, and a horde like this usually meant they were on the hunt. Veronica felt a little tense seeing how many there were. Yido urged both Liddy and Veronica to make a break for it. However, at that moment, Liddy was amazed as he watched the entire horde of dragons. At that moment, Yido shouted that they were in deep trouble as the winged drakes were coming straight for them. Although winged drakes couldn't use any spells, they had nasty claws and a shredding beak on top of their thick hide. And those dragons were at their most dangerous when hunting in a pack. Veronica suggested to Yido that he should talk to the winged drakes, thinking they might listen to him since he was a fellow dragon. Yido shouted at Veronica not to be stupid, reminding her that he had already told her they weren't the same. He then yelled that they had to make a break for it. At that moment, Liddy was standing quietly, which made Yido tensely shout and ask what the heck Liddy was doing, as they needed to get Veronica out of this situation. Liddy was confusingly wondering why those drakes were flying in the direction of Xavier Mountain. Yido, equally puzzled, asked how they were supposed to know that. Yido shared that, for all he knew, those dragons just wanted to drive them out of their territory. Liddy then tensely asked him not to tell him that Mr. Demoness's hometown was under attack by those winged drakes. Suddenly, a winged drake attacked Veronica, but Liddy quickly stepped in and dodged the strike. Yido urged Liddy to get them away from the area. Liddy mentioned that he thought there were many dwarfs living in Xavier Mountain, and if they ran in that direction, they would lead the winged drake straight to them. Hearing this, Veronica was surprised, while Yido tensely shouted at Liddy not to say he was going to fight. Liddy responded with a firm yes, saying they had to stop the winged drakes right there. Yido tensely asked if Liddy was really kidding. Liddy dodged another attack and asked Veronica if she could cast her spell at the winged drakes, offering to help her create a magic circle like last time. Veronica, looking confused, asked if Liddy was sure, explaining that it would take some time to create a magic circle big enough for her spell. She added that there was a chance one of the winged drakes might crash into the formation and cause it to fizzle out. Liddy responded with a yes, acknowledging that she was right and admitting he hadn't thought of that. He said their only other option was for Yido to use his spell to blow them away. Yido was stunned and asked if Liddy really thought he could do that. Liddy, confused, asked what Yido meant by saying he couldn't. Yido shouted back, asking what Liddy meant and why. Finally, Yido decided he would explain this to Liddy. Yido explained that a magic circle requires a lot of concentration to maintain. He added that creating one while on the move was usually something only professionals could do. Veronica pulling something like that off was nothing short of abnormal. To be honest, Yido admitted he didn't have a spell with enough mana to throw all those drakes off their tail. Hearing this, Liddy tensed and asked what they should do then. Liddy thought that neither Yido's nor Veronica's spells would work, which meant he had to come up with something. He felt a bit frustrated with himself, wishing that if only he had a way to fight back on his own, this wouldn't be so difficult. Just then, a drake tried to attack them from behind, prompting Veronica to tensely shout a warning to Liddy. However, it was too late for Liddy to react, and to everyone's surprise, out of nowhere, Demoness appeared and blocked the attack. The drake was hurt from the impact, while both Yido and Veronica looked at Demoness in confusion. Liddy was also a bit surprised to see him. Demoness remarked that he could see Liddy was still the same as ever. Liddy happily told Demoness that it had been a while and that he was very glad to see him. Demoness replied that it was the same for him, but their chat would have to wait. He then turned and began fighting the drakes. Seeing the injured drakes, Liddy shouted to Demoness that two of the horde were starting to fly away. Demoness replied for Liddy to buckle up and then started running toward him. Liddy replied with a yes and got into a position to do something. Yido and Veronica looked on in confusion, unsure of what he was planning to do. At that moment, Demoness jumped toward Liddy's hand, and Liddy used his power to help Demoness leap into the air. After reaching the air, Demoness attacked one drake with a direct hit and then defeated the second one by throwing his axe at it. In the end, he had taken down all the drakes. Seeing this, Veronica was amazed, and Yido was also surprised by the power of the warrior of the hero's party. At that moment, Liddy shouted Demoness's name and happily ran toward him. Demoness got into a position to catch Liddy in a hugging stance, asking him to come over. When Liddy jumped toward Demoness to hug him, Demoness was forcefully pushed back by his own power, but he quickly used his strength to stop himself. Seeing this, both Yido and Veronica felt a bit tense. Demoness then told Liddy that it was heartening to see him doing well. Liddy smiled and agreed with Demoness, saying it was the same for him. Yido approached and asked if that was some kind of ritual. The scene then shifted to a few minutes later, where Demoness and the others were heading toward the dwarf village. While on the way, Demoness shared that although Liddy might be reliable for now, when he was a newbie, he was a total handful. Demoness explained that Liddy would run away screaming whenever he saw a monster, no matter how weak it was. Veronica responded that she didn't know that, while Yido surprisingly asked if Liddy really got scared that easily. Liddy embarrassingly asked Demoness to stop embarrassing him. Demoness then said he had to admit that their adventures together with the hero had truly dulled his common sense. He realized he had failed to notice the abnormality in their party until he returned to society. Demoness then clarified that he meant Liddy, as Liddy was quite powerful by human standards. Hearing this, Liddy blushed and smiled widely. Yido tensely remarked that he thought Demoness' common sense was still a bit rusty, adding that considering how Liddy had launched him a few dozen feet in the air, that was way underselling it. Demoness then bowed in front of Veronica and Yido, expressing his hope that they would continue being good friends with Liddy. Veronica became embarrassed and tensely asked Demoness not to be so humble, assuring him that they were glad to be friends with Liddy. Demoness then told them that this was where they would part ways. He pointed in a direction, explaining that this path would lead them to Fenalicia. At that moment, Liddy hesitated but finally asked if he could help Demoness against the winged drakes. Demoness responded that he had intended to keep it to himself so as not to worry Liddy. But it seemed Liddy had wisened up quite a bit after all. The scene then shifted to later, when Liddy and the others finally reached Demoness's hometown. Liddy excitedly asked Demoness if this was really his hometown. Demoness responded with a yes, explaining that it was a peaceful little village where most of the people stayed cooped up inside the mines or the forge for a living. He added that they all lived earnestly, contributing to the village in their own way. Veronica replied that she didn't know how to say it, but it was really quiet for a village. Demoness responded that it was because the winged drakes had been attacking there relentlessly for the past week. The dragons appeared without warning from the far side of the skies. Whenever they showed up, they would wreak havoc in the village and harm the people. None of the warriors guarding the place could do much, as those cretins launched their assault from the sky. Demoness then shared that, fortunately, he had just happened to return recently. This way, they had been able to keep the damage to a minimum. However, the danger from the winged drakes still persisted, leaving them little choice but to tell the women and children to stay shut in their homes until the threat passed. At that moment, Veronica noticed a little girl peeking at them from behind a curtain. She smiled and waved, but the girl got tense and quickly hid back inside her home. Demoness continued, saying that they still didn't know what was causing those blasted drakes to attack the village. Until they figured it out, they had no choice but to remain on high alert. He added that if only they had a clue about what might be causing it, that would be a good start. Suddenly, Yido spoke up, asking everyone to hold on, as if they really couldn't tell, because it was pretty obvious. Both Liddy and Demoness looked at him in confusion and curiosity, asking what he meant. Yido furiously asked if they were really serious. Veronica told Yido that both Liddy and Demoness were having a serious conversation, and she wasn't sure why he was joking at a time like this. Yido furiously shouted that he wasn't joking at all. Suddenly, he realized something and, feeling embarrassed, shared that he had forgotten humans couldn't hear it, but it was loud and clear to a proud Lexi dragon's ears like his. Yido shared that he could hear the voice of a drakeling coming from the village. Hearing this, Demoness was stunned and asked, "What? A drakeling in the village?" Yido confirmed, saying yes, as the drakeling was crying for help. And that was likely why the winged drakes were attacking. It was probably the baby of the boss of their pack. That's why they were mustering all their forces to scour the village. Veronica happily praised Yido for his insight, but Demoness interjected, saying it didn't make sense. He pointed out that nobody in the village had seen a beak or hide of a drakeling. Yido responded that it was no wonder no one had seen it, because the drakeling's cry was coming from the mountain. He pointed to a specific spot, and when Demoness looked, he realized it was the abandoned mines. Demoness explains that the dwarves in the village often explored those mines in the past, but about 10 years ago, a group of monsters showed up, making it too dangerous, so the mines have been sealed off since then. No one knows what has happened to it lately. It's very likely that the monsters have multiplied quickly while it's been left alone, and he imagines the inside has been turned into their nest, like a dungeon. Veronica curiously asks if it means what she's thinking. Demoness replies yes, explaining that to stop the winged drakes from attacking the village, they must go into the abandoned mines and find the drakeling. Hearing this, Liddy lit up excitedly, shouting that they were going to dive into a dungeon. Demoness replied with a yes, adding that he could see Liddy's enthusiasm for dungeon diving hadn't faded one bit over the years. In the next scene, Demoness breaks the chain on the abandoned mine, and Liddy moves the stone blocking the entrance. Demoness then tells everyone to get ready, saying he will lead them as they venture inside. Demoness also asks Princess Veronica and Yido to stay behind him, then tells Liddy that he's counting on him to guard the rear. Confused, Liddy in response asks, "Wait, him?" A dungeon is actually very complex, almost like a maze. On top of that, with the poor visibility, there's a high chance that any adventuring party could be ambushed from behind. That's why members with the lowest defense, like the porter and mages, are usually placed in the center of the party. The rear guard's role is crucial. They are responsible for watching the party's back and staying alert for sneak attacks. Because of this, they are usually the toughest fighters in the group. So Liddy wasn't shocked but actually surprised that Demoness was asking him to take on such an important role. Excitedly, Liddy shouts that he swears to protect all of them, even if it costs him his life. Seeing this, Yido confusingly asks what has suddenly gotten into Liddy. Demoness praises Liddy for his good spirit and encourages him to hold on to those words. Demoness then tells everyone to move on since their goal for this dive is to locate the drakeling. Once they enter, Demoness thanks Yido for the illumination magic, saying that carrying a torch in one hand would slow down his reflexes. Yido boasts that they should all be grateful he's with them, or else Veronica would be the only one able to cast magic. He jokes that they definitely don't want that since the mine might collapse on them. Veronica, hearing this, sadly and tensely calls out Yido's name to make him quiet. Suddenly, Demoness shouts for everyone to be careful because there's a monster. Yido, shocked, asks, "What? Already?" But upon looking closer, Demoness felt relieved and told everyone that it was just a basic slime, so it wouldn't pose any trouble for them. Demoness then asks Liddy to try fighting it. Liddy responds with a confident yes. Seeing this, Veronica confusingly asks if Liddy is really going to fight. Yido also curiously wonders if Liddy can even swing a weapon. Liddy then runs toward the slime with an axe in hand, ready to attack. But when Liddy gets close to the slime and goes to attack, he suddenly realizes he has no axe in his hand. Confused, he looks around and asks where the axe has gone. Yido, surprised, asks if Liddy really didn't know that the axe slipped out of his fingers and got stuck in the ceiling when he swung it. Liddy, in shock, asks, "What?" At that moment, Demoness shouts for Liddy to be careful, but by the time Liddy turns to look, he's already attacked by the slime. However, the slime is defeated after hitting Liddy. After that, Liddy falls silent and doesn't say a word. Demoness remarks that at least the slime is defeated this way, but he also notes that Liddy hasn't improved at all. Liddy sadly replies, "Sorry." Demoness then points out that Liddy's main weakness is his inability to mount an offense. He adds that Liddy's combat skills are virtually non-existent, as he couldn't even wield a weapon to attack. Yido also chimes in, saying he guesses that Liddy is basically a pro with a kitchen knife and a rod, but when it comes to using weapons in battle, it's like Liddy suddenly loses control of his hands. At that moment, Demoness didn't say anything and began to think that Liddy's strange inability to attack wasn't going to change anytime soon. He wished he could nurture Liddy enough to help him overcome it naturally. But they simply didn't have time, so Demoness told Liddy that it was okay if he couldn't attack. He just needed to become better at defending himself. At that moment, Demoness also handed a ring to Liddy. Seeing this, Liddy curiously asks what it is. Demoness responds that Liddy can keep it on with his gloves. He just needs to put it on his finger. Demoness explains that whenever Liddy wishes to protect himself or someone else from danger, the mana and the ring will definitely help him. Hearing this, Liddy is stunned and asks if it's a magic item, saying he can't take it. Demoness insists that Liddy should take it because it was specially made for him. Liddy, surprised, asks, "What? For me?" Demoness responds that dwarves are natural-born blacksmiths, and while he may be somewhat an outlier who chose to venture out in his youth, he is still a dwarf. So while he may not be the best dwarf for the job, he poured all his smithing skills into forging that ring for Liddy. Hearing this, Liddy becomes very happy and hugs Demoness in excitement. Liddy expresses that he is very happy and plans to treasure the ring for as long as he lives. Demoness praises Liddy, saying that's very good. Meanwhile, Veronica, watching the conversation, thinks to herself, wondering if there really is mana inside the ring. But she couldn't feel anything coming from it, so she wonders if she just isn't skilled enough to sense it. After this, they all continue to progress through the dungeon without any major issues. Along the way, they fought various monsters and defeated them with the help of Mr. Demoness. After reaching a certain point, Ito confidently states that there's no mistaking it. This is where the Drakeling is hiding. Demoness responds with an okay, hoping everyone is ready, and says, "Let's go." When Liddy steps inside, he is surprised to see a very small winged drake. Veronica, on the other hand, is thrilled to see the Drakeling, exclaiming that it's very adorable. Veronica exclaims that she didn't know Drakelings were such adorable little creatures. As she approaches the Drakeling, Ito shouts for her to get away, reminding her that it's still a monster. Ito then wonders how on earth such a young Drakeling ended up this deep inside the dungeon. Demoness responds that he thinks the ceiling of the room is quite high, so he assumes the Drakeling must have fallen through. Ito looks up and sees that there's no hole in the ceiling, so he asks where the Drakeling could have fallen from. Liddy responds that if the dungeon structure is damaged, it naturally repairs itself over time using mana. So that means the Drakeling most likely got injured while in the air and fell through the ceiling. The hole then repaired itself before the Drakeling was able to fly again, leaving it stuck here. Liddy notices there's a hole in its wings. It's likely going to take more time before the Drakeling can fly on its own. Veronica then asks if the little Drakeling's cries were the reason the winged drakes attacked the village. If that's the case, she wonders if they are going to slay it. Demoness responds that, honestly, that would be the easiest way to solve their problem. He then turns to Liddy and asks what he thinks about it. Liddy replies that in his earliest memories, he was already an orphan and doesn't even know what his parents looked like. He adds that this Drakeling should still have a chance. Liddy suggests that if they could reunite the Drakeling with its parents, that should solve the problem, right? Demoness responds that he somehow knew Liddy would choose that option. Liddy happily offers to carry everything himself. Suddenly, there's a loud cracking sound from the ceiling, and everyone looks up in confusion. Out of nowhere, a winged drake bursts through the ceiling, breaking through the stone. Seeing the winged drake, Ito and Veronica tense up, while Demoness questions where these scaled variants came from and wonders if it could be the child's parents. The winged drake stands in front of the exit and lets out a powerful roar. Liddy, seeing the winged drake, tenses up as it blocks off the entrance. Demoness shouts for Liddy to keep Princess Veronica safe. Liddy replies with an okay, assuring Demoness that he will do it. Demoness declares that he will incapacitate the winged drake. He jumps to attack, but when he lands the blow, he realizes there's no damage at all on the drake. He wonders if its scales are just too tough. This time, the drake swings its tail at Demoness, throwing him against the wall with a loud crash. Seeing Demoness get injured, Liddy and Veronica tense up. The winged drake then turns its glare toward Liddy and Veronica. Seeing this, Ito tenses up and tells Veronica that it's time for her to use some of her magic. But then he suddenly remembers and shouts that she can't because they'll get buried alive. The winged drake roars, causing Ito to tense up. Meanwhile, Liddy is deep in thought, wondering what he can do to get them out of this situation. Liddy thinks that if only he were half the warrior that Mr. Demoness is, he might be able to defeat the winged drake himself. Suddenly, he hears Demoness's voice urging him to use the ring. Seeing that Demoness is perfectly healthy and unscathed, Ito is stunned and asks how Demoness didn't even get a scratch. At that moment, Liddy realizes that while he may be hopeless when it comes to attacking with this ring, he should be able to protect what's important to him. Demoness tells Liddy that he will instruct him on how to utilize the ring, so he should listen carefully. Liddy responds with an okay. Both Ito and Veronica become very excited, thinking about how a magic ring forged by a warrior from the hero's party might work. They wonder what this ring is capable of doing. Ito suggests that if it were just a normal magic ring, it would likely only boost his defense. However, since it was forged by a warrior from the hero's party, he wonders if it could conjure up a rock-solid barrier. Demoness instructs Liddy to raise his arm to chest level and place his hand in front of himself. At that moment, the winged drake charges toward Liddy, causing Veronica to tense up. Ito is also worried because Liddy is still not ready. Demoness then tells Liddy to defend himself. In response, Liddy pushes his hand forward, and the winged drake is suddenly smashed against the wall. Seeing this, both Veronica and Ito are shocked. Even Liddy is surprised and exclaims that it was an amazing defense. Hearing this, both Ito and Veronica tense up even more. Veronica calls out to Liddy, saying that no matter how he looks at it, she thinks that qualifies as an attack. But Demoness interrupts, insisting that it was a perfectly executed defense. Liddy explains that he simply pushed back against his foe who had attacked him, a very basic defensive maneuver. He happily responds that the defensive skill Mr. Demoness taught him was incredibly powerful. Ito interrupts, saying that he didn't think it worked that way. Liddy again thanks Demoness for the ring he made for him. Demoness then explains that the ring doesn't actually have any mana in it. Liddy, shocked, asks, "What?" Demoness shares that it had bothered him for quite some time how he could teach Liddy to defend himself when Liddy couldn't possibly swing a weapon. And that was the answer he came up with. If Liddy was unable to attack, then they must simply add a new arsenal to his defense, a very powerful one at that. Demoness also explains that whenever Liddy defends himself, he subconsciously holds back his strength, so he gave the ring to Liddy to encourage him to give it his all, and the result was clear. It was a perfect defense, or they could say it transcended the realm of defense. Liddy could even call it his new ability, Super Extreme Defense. Liddy finally acquired the auxiliary skill, Supreme Defense. Demoness tells Liddy that he has passed it, and from now on, he is a true warrior. Hearing this, Liddy feels very happy and thanks Demoness for it. Liddy runs toward Demoness to hug him, jumping up and wrapping his arms around him with all his strength. Demoness braces himself, preventing himself from being knocked back by the force of the embrace. Seeing this, Ito asks if they really have to do this every single time. Meanwhile, Veronica happily shares that she is very happy for Liddy. Ito remarks that he knew the kid was anything but normal, but he didn't expect Liddy to smash a giant winged drake into the wall with his bare hands the moment he learned how to attack. Liddy responds that it wasn't an attack, he was just defending himself. Demoness agrees with Liddy, saying it was an amazing defense. Ito, feeling tense, responds with an okay, conceding to whatever the two of them say. Suddenly, the drakeling starts crying again, prompting Ito to remember it and say that they almost forgot about the little drake. Veronica adds that they still need to return the drakeling to its nest. Ito nervously walks toward the winged drake, saying they knocked out the parent who was supposed to bring the drakeling back. Ito taps the drake's body to see if it's still alive after Liddy's attack. Suddenly, the winged drake opens its eyes, making Liddy tense up. He quickly runs away, shouting for everyone to be careful because the drake is still alive. Ito also mentioned that there wasn't even a scratch on the drake. He asked Liddy to hit the winged drake again with his attack. Liddy shouted back that it was just a defense move. To everyone's surprise, the winged drake simply grabbed the drakeling in its mouth and flew away. Seeing this, Liddy asked if the drake had escaped. Demoness responded with a no, saying he didn't think that was the case. After taking to the air, the winged drake started howling in pain. Hearing this, Liddy became confused and wondered aloud if the drake had just screamed. Veronica responded, saying she thought the winged drake was probably very angry. At that moment, Ito mentioned that it wasn't just a normal scream. Veronica, curious, asked if Ito could understand it. Ito then asked everyone to think about it, reminding them that the drakeling's cry had attracted a group of A-class winged drakes to the village. So what's going to happen when that big one does the same thing? It's trying to call its flock down on us, someone worriedly says. Ito tensely shouts that there are at least a couple dozen winged drakes heading their way. Soon, Ito shouts that he thinks there are even more, like a whole horde of winged drakes are making a beeline for Xavier Mountain. Veronica, tense, asks what they should do. Ito responds that he thinks they'll be fine since they have Demoness and Liddy with them, but he can't say the same for the people hiding in the village. Hearing this, Veronica became scared and said it was horrible. She urged Demoness and Liddy to do something, suggesting that if they acted quickly, they could at least minimize the damage. But when Veronica and Ito looked at Liddy and Demoness, they were stunned to see that both were casually discussing having some tea. Ito tensely shouts, asking what they are doing. Liddy responds that the tea made from howl flowers is really good for warming up the throat. Hearing this, Ito furiously shouts that no one cares about warming up when the village is about to be attacked. Demoness then reassures them not to worry, saying he has instructed Liddy on what to do. So his role as a teacher had come to an end. Now it was time for him to return to being a warrior, and this warrior shines the most when facing superior numbers like theirs. In the village, people were scared as they saw the winged drakes coming to attack again. The elders urged everyone to evacuate the women and children. Suddenly, the mutated winged drake spotted Demoness standing on the ridge, and one of them roared, commanding the others to attack him. Demoness stood tall in front of the winged drakes. Seeing this, Veronica tensely exclaims how unbelievably huge the horde is. Ito, also tense, asks Liddy if Demoness will really be alright all by himself. Liddy smiles and replies that Demoness will be okay. Demoness suddenly froze, his body taking on a strange shape. At that moment, Liddy said he was more worried about them watching Demoness fight from so close. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Demoness let out a roar or cry in a very weird voice. It was actually his combat skill called War Cry at level 88. The sound stunned the winged drakes, and Yido and Veronica were also surprised by it. Even the entire village shivered at the sound. Yido tensely shouts, asking what the heck that was since his ears hurt, while Veronica, equally surprised, says it was incredible. By then, the winged drakes had also started flying away. Suddenly, Veronica noticed something and told everyone to look, as the drakeling was falling. Seeing this, Yido tensely asked if the war cry had knocked out the drakeling. He shouted that the drakeling was going to crash into the ground at this rate. Everyone was scared. The mutated winged drake, Yido, and Veronica. In the chaos, Demoness slipped along the mountain to catch the falling drakeling. After catching the drakeling, Liddy happily said it was close and that he was glad he made it in time. Yido was impressed to see that Liddy had descended all the way down to the foot of the mountain in a flash. The kid was as quick on his feet as ever. Suddenly, Yido saw something and tensely shouted at Liddy to look behind, as the mutated winged drake was approaching. When Liddy turned around, the winged drake was roaring, but to everyone's surprise, it simply held the drakeling in its mouth. Seeing this, Liddy smiled, and both he and the winged drake made eye contact. After that, the drake flew away without doing anything. Yido, surprised and confused, asked what had just happened. Demoness responded that the drakeling's parent was a variant, a monster that had evolved to be more advanced than its peers. Its heightened intelligence must have allowed it to understand that Liddy had just saved his child's life. Liddy came over and asked if everything was okay. Yido was stunned, realizing that Liddy had returned in just seconds. Demoness then said that the drakeling had returned to its flock, so they shouldn't need to worry about any more winged drake attacks for the time being. Hearing this, Liddy asked, "So that means?" Demoness responded that it meant they had accomplished their objective. With that, Liddy, Yido, and Veronica started celebrating. The scene then shifted to a few minutes later, where the village elder named Relic announced that, as the elder of the village, he wanted to extend their utmost gratitude to Demoness and his companions for saving the village from the winged drakes. Relic began to cry, saying he couldn't believe it, and that the problem child had truly grown up to become such a reliable adult since leaving the village. Liddy, curious, asked Demoness who the old man was. Demoness replied that, as Liddy heard, the man was the village elder. He then told Relic that he was already beyond the years for tears. Yido, in shock, told Demoness that he thought Relic and Demoness practically looked the same. Suddenly, a little girl came up to Veronica and hugged her, saying thank you for saving them. Veronica, feeling embarrassed, responded that she didn't think she had done anything. The girl happily said that her mommy said she could play outside again, and it was all thanks to Veronica. Veronica smiled and patted the girl's head, telling her she hoped the children would have tons of fun outside but to remember to stay safe. The girl happily responded with an okay and promised to remember to be safe. The next day, when Liddy and Veronica were leaving, Demoness asked if they were already going. Liddy replied with a yes. Liddy then thanked Demoness for everything, especially for teaching him how to defend himself and for the ring. Demoness replied that there was no need for thanks. In fact, he should be the one to thank all of them. Demoness thanked all of them, expressing his gratitude for assisting him in protecting his village. He then told them that if the need ever arose, they should simply call for him, and no matter where they were, he would stop at nothing to help them. After they all left, Demoness said he thought it was time for Eidner to stop hiding behind that tree. Hearing this, Eidner was stunned and came out, asking if Demoness really knew. And there she thought it would be nice to catch him by surprise for once. Eidner then explained that she had cloaking magic enabled, so Liddy and the others shouldn't have noticed her, at least. Demoness told Eidner that he could sense the presence she was giving off from a mile away. Eidner, feeling tense, asked what presence he was talking about and shouted at Demoness to stop spouting nonsense and explain it in terms she could understand. Eidner then mentioned that, on that note, she had just said goodbye to those three not too long ago, and seeing them so soon wouldn't be good for her image, especially since she was the only one there with her mana projection. Hearing this, Demoness remarked that mana projection was a high-tier spell, so she must have something important to say if she was using it. Eidner then admitted that she needed his help as a party member. Demoness curiously asked what she needed help with. Eidner shared that a torrent of evil was fast approaching and that it was something she couldn't dispel on her own. She also mentioned that she didn't want to involve those kids in this because it was just too dangerous. That's why after this she planned to see Farah and Rosark to reassemble the heroes' party. The scene then shifted to Xanamund, who had finally reached near Liddy and Veronica. He apologized for his lateness, but added that she didn't have to worry, as he swore to claim her life with his own hands. The scene shifted back to Liddy, who was carrying an anonymous girl on his back. The girl laughed and said it was very fun to ride on his shoulders. Liddy asked her to hold on properly and to let him know if she felt sick. The girl responded with an okay, and said she thought he was very kind. Liddy replied that he was only doing what anyone would do in his shoes. The girl then apologized to Veronica, saying it was a pity for her to walk since she had taken Veronica's seat. Veronica smiled and told the girl not to worry about it, as she was injured after all. The girl was amazed to hear this and said how kind Veronica was, so she would gladly take that offer. The girl happily shouted for Liddy to go onward. Liddy smiled and responded that he wasn't hoarse. The girl's name was Mia, and Liddy and his group had come across her after she injured her leg. Evidently, Mia had barely escaped a monster ambush, managing to keep only her life intact. She shared that she was also on her way to meet her grandmother. Hearing this, Veronica said it was very horrible. Mia responded that she knew it was horrible, but it was all good after all, as it looked like she was going to have a lot more fun on the way now with them accompanying her, right? Liddy replied with a yes, saying they would deliver her safe and sound since they were on their way anyway. Mia laughed and said it sounded like he was saying she was some kind of quest item. At that time, Yuta was thinking that to get to Hansville, someone needed to climb an entire mountain. Yet a small girl like Mia attempted to make the journey alone, and he sensed something fishy about it. They couldn't be too cautious, especially since enemies had even sent a noble assassin after them last time. Suddenly, Yuta noticed that Veronica also looked tense, so he asked her if she thought the same. Veronica asked if he thought so, noting that Mia was sticking a bit too close to Liddy, wasn't she? She added that she didn't really mind, but Liddy might feel uncomfortable. Hearing this, Yuta realized and told Veronica that she was just jealous, and that she was really a grown-up now, wasn't she? Veronica embarrassingly shouted that it wasn't the case. Mia and Liddy looked at Veronica, and she smiled, waving her hand to show that it was nothing. Liddy then said he thought they had walked pretty far, so they should have their meals. When Liddy opened the bag and saw the fruits, he noted that they were short on them. He then asked Mia if she didn't mind helping collect some fruits from the trees around. Yuta interrupted and asked Liddy if he wanted him to lend a hand. Liddy smiled and thanked Yuta for the offer, but he thought he and Mia would be fine on their own. When Liddy gave a thumbs up, Yuta felt tense because he didn't want Liddy to get into any trouble. As they proceeded toward the forest to pick fruits, Mia waved goodbye and asked them to take care of their things. Meanwhile, Veronica thought tensely about whether Liddy really wanted to go with Mia that badly. At that moment, Yuta thought it looked like Liddy also sensed that something about Mia felt off. He hoped Liddy would watch over himself, as they still didn't know how dangerous Mia might be. After entering the forest, Liddy suggested to Mia that they should split up to look for fruits and make sure to only grab the ones that looked ripe. Mia responded with an okay. At that time, Mia and Liddy reached the edge of a ridge, where she asked him to look beside it because she saw something. Liddy walked over, looked down, and asked what she had seen. Suddenly, Mia pushed him toward the ditch, thanking him for taking care of her and saying goodbye. After throwing Liddy into the ditch, she was very happy and laughed, reveling in the fact that he was supposed to be guarding the princess. She thought that peace must have rotten their brains. She even felt that it was so much for be wary of him, and she could swear that Liddy was such a worrywart. Mia was very happy that Veronica's bodyguard was already dead, believing that now she only had to take care of the princess before she could go home. Suddenly, to her shock, Liddy appeared back on the cliff. Mia shockingly asked Liddy how he climbed back up. Liddy laughed and told her not to worry, as he would explain. Liddy explained that first he had stabbed a branch into the rock as he was falling, and then he used the momentum from the fall to launch himself back up. Hearing this, Mia was stunned and shouted that he was definitely kidding. She asked if he was really human, wondering why he had a random branch with him. It shows that once Rosark told Liddy it's an adventurer's duty to help anyone in need. An adventurer who ignores a troubled passerby won't get any requests. But not everyone he meets on the road will be an innocent traveler. Sometimes they might be trying to trick him, and some might try to stab him in the back or while he's asleep. Farah smiles and asks if Rosark was speaking from his experience with women. Rosark makes a weird face and replies with a yes, like that one time with Anya from the guild when he seriously thought she was interested in him. Anyway, that doesn't mean Liddy should choose who gets his help. A true adventurer is always prepared for the worst, so even if things go wrong, they'll still find a way to save the day. The scene shifts back to the present, where Liddy shares that he had been suspicious of her since they first met, so he made sure to prepare himself accordingly, which made Mia furious. Liddy then asks Mia why she was trying to murder Princess Veronica. In response, Mia angrily asks if he's seriously asking her why. Suddenly, the atmosphere around her begins to change. Seeing this, Liddy starts to wonder about it. Mia transforms into her demon form and shouts that if he seriously can't guess by now, Then the piece must have really rotted his tiny human brain. Liddy, shocked, asks Mia if she's a demon and how that's possible, since the demon lord should be dead. Mia doesn't respond and instead directly attacks Liddy with a punch. Liddy is thrown toward the ditch again, but to Mia's surprise, he pulls out a rope and tosses it toward a tree branch, securing it. Seeing this, Mia is stunned and tensely asks, "What the hell is that now?" Liddy used his support skills called lasso and climbing. Mia was completely furious with Liddy and said that he was definitely one of those stubborn brats. Mia shouts that it's fine because she will make sure he's double dead by the time she's done with him. Hearing the strange sounds coming from the forest where Liddy and Mia went, Veronica tensely asks what that was and if something happened to Liddy. Ito replies that he has no clue, but they need to keep an eye on their surroundings since something might be approaching. Deep down, Ito thinks his feelings were spot on and wonders if Liddy is okay or not. Suddenly, Ito saw something coming from the sky, and when it landed hastily, he was stunned to realize it was Liddy. Both Ito and Veronica looked at Liddy with tense and confused expressions. At that moment, Liddy shouts for them to be careful because Mia is aiming for Veronica's life. Just then, Mia arrives and attacks Veronica, but Liddy grabs her and starts running away to dodge the blow. After this, everyone stood facing each other. Veronica was still confused, while Ito looked at Mia in shock and asked if it was really her and what the heck had happened to her. Liddy responds that Mia is a demon. Hearing this, Ito is stunned and shouts, "What? Why is a demon coming after us? And how can a demon be after us when the demon lord was supposed to be dead, right?" Liddy tensely replies that Ito is right. It doesn't make sense because demons should be extinct now that the demon lord has been slain. Liddy explains that demons are intelligent monsters blessed with exceptional magical powers, and they usually look similar to humans. They receive their abilities from the great demon lord. But the great demon lord should be dead after the hero defeated him, which should have caused the demons to go extinct. Confused, Liddy asks Mia what she is now. Mia apologizes to Liddy, saying she doesn't have to answer his questions. Liddy then states that since Mia is aiming for Veronica, he suspects that Fenelish's current ruler has a hand in how demons still exist after the fall of the demon lord. Hearing this, both Veronica and Ito shudder. Ito even asks Liddy if he's kidding, saying there's no way a peaceful kingdom like Fenelisha could be in cahoots with the demons. Veronica interrupts Ito, saying there was the assassination attempt, and she hasn't been able to contact anyone from the kingdom, so everything seems to line up. At that moment, Mia shouts that she was ordered to kill Princess Veronica, but now it seems she has to kill all three of them. Saying this, Mia lunges at Liddy, who can only defend himself. Mia remarks that Liddy is a tough opponent and confusingly asks why he isn't attacking, wondering if he's hiding some kind of trump card. Deep down, Liddy was thinking that Mia was strong and they wouldn't make it this way, so he needed to do something. He decided he would endure the initial barrage and aim to counter her attack when she came in for the finish, using supreme defense. At that moment, Mia tells Liddy to let her share something with him. She says he had been blabbering about being some kind of demon encyclopedia, but she bets he doesn't know this part. She explains that there are two ways a demon can assume a human form. Meanwhile, Liddy is waiting for the right moment to counter her using supreme defense. Mia continues, saying that the first way is by morphing their own body into that of a human, and the second is by transferring their consciousness to take over a human's body. Liddy was ready to counter her with supreme defense when Mia suddenly spoke up, saying she was the latter and that this body belonged to a poor innocent little village girl. Hearing this, Liddy halted his attack. At that moment, when Liddy lost his concentration, Mia landed a punch on him. Seeing this, both Ito and Veronica tensed up as Liddy lay on the ground in pain. Mia taunts Liddy, asking if he's a bleeding heart, sparing a thought for some stupid little girl he doesn't even know while he's fighting for his own life. Mia also tells Liddy to remember that it's all thanks to him that Veronica is as good as dead now. This time, Ito urges Veronica to run, saying he will hold Mia back for a while. But Veronica replies that she won't do that and insists on fighting alongside him against Mia. Ito shouts at Veronica to run again. At this, Mia laughs and asks if it's really the right time for both of them to fight against her. Mia tells both of them to just give up, saying that no one is going to save Veronica's life because she's going to chase Veronica down and kill her anyway. Mia charged at Veronica to kill her, and seeing this, Veronica closed her eyes in fear. But suddenly, out of nowhere, to everyone's surprise, Xanamund appeared and blocked Mia's attack. Mia was stunned and tensely asked what that was. Even Ito, in shock, asked Xanamund what he was doing there. In response, Xanamund asks Veronica if he hadn't made himself clear, stating that he believes he declared her life was his to claim. Mia shouts again, asking Xanamund who he is. Ito is surprised, wondering if Xanamund really saved them. Xanamund replies once more that he believes he has already declared that her life is his to claim. Hearing this, Veronica is stunned and wonders if Xanamund is really going to kill her. Ito shouts at Xanamund, saying he doesn't know what his plan is, but if Xanamund is really thinking of taking on that demon, he should stop. Xanamund curiously asks why that is. Ito shouts that it's because demons are insanely strong. Their physical strength and magical prowess are far beyond that of common humans. It's basically a death wish to fight one head-on unless he's a fighter who can stand toe-to-toe with the hero's party. Hearing this, Xanamund responds that it's interesting to know. Mia thanks Ito for the explanation. She then tells Xanamund that now he knows how dangerous she is, so it's better for him to run before it's too late. But soon she ran toward Xanamund, shouting that it was too late for him to run and that he was now dead meat. Xanamund responds that he thinks he'll be just fine, thanking her, as humans are intelligent after all. Hearing this, Mia becomes furious and shouts whether it means demons aren't intelligent. In her anger, she attacks Xanamund. He dodges her strike and comments that it seems Ito speaks the truth. Mia truly possesses inhuman strength and speed. Mia shouts at Xanamund that it's too late to regret his actions. As she attacks him, Xanamund blocks her strike with his sword. They both exchange punches and sword strikes, clashing fiercely with each other. Ito and Veronica were stunned to witness the intensity of their battle. Veronica was about to say something, but before she could, Liddy came up behind them and remarked that it was an amazing battle for sure. Hearing this, both Ito and Veronica were shocked for a moment. Ito, in shock, asks Liddy if he's really alive. Liddy responds with a yes, fortunately. Ito then asks how that's possible, as Liddy looks to be in tip-top shape, wondering what his body is even made of. Liddy replies that he's pretty sure he lost consciousness for a split second and apologizes to Veronica for endangering her. Veronica tells him not to be sorry, as she's just glad he's okay. Liddy then says that he's not sure why Xanamund is fighting on their side, but it works out, so they should take this chance to run. At this, Ito shouts no, believing it's best for Liddy to watch the fight unfold. Liddy, confused, asks, "What?" Ito urges Liddy to think back on their journey so far, pointing out that he has only lost twice, first to Xanamund's surprise attack and the second time when Mia threw him off guard by taking the girl's body hostage. Both times, Liddy only lost due to factors outside of pure fighting power, so by watching Mia and Xanamund fight, he might pick up some hints to address that weakness. Ito adds that he doesn't know why, but the demons are trying to prevent Veronica from returning to Fenalicia. With the situation as dire as it is, they will need Liddy to become as strong as he can. Liddy responds that he thinks it's dangerous. Ito considers this for a moment. Meanwhile, on the other side, Xanamund and Mia continue to fight, clashing punches and swords with each other. Mia shouts at Xanamund to stop struggling already. Watching all of this, Veronica is amazed that Xanamund is managing to hold Mia back so well, remarking that she didn't know he was such a powerful swordsman. Liddy responds that it's not quite that. In this case, it's more accurate to say Xanamund is more skilled than he is strong. When Mia throws a punch, Xanamund doesn't just raise his sword to block her attack. He drives his sword into hers to decrease the momentum of Mia's strike, significantly reducing its power. So that's how Xanamund is managing to fight Mia on equal ground, but pulling that off requires exceptional skill and concentration. At that moment, Mia shouts at Xanamund, telling him he can't expect to defeat her just by deflecting her attacks. She adds that once he runs out of stamina, she will make him realize just how out of his depth he truly is. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a blast erupts inside Mia. Seeing this, Veronica confusedly asks if it was an explosion. Veronica is surprised that Xanamund cast a spell without a magic circle and without a chant. Even a full-fledged mage would find it difficult to do that in the heat of battle. But to everyone's surprise, Mia gets back in action and attacks Xanamund, saying that the blast didn't even tickle her. Xanamund blocks the attack, but this time he feels the impact and gets thrown back a little. Liddy is shocked and confused, wondering how Mia doesn't seem hurt from that. Veronica explains that casting a spell without a magic circle or chance tends to reduce its power considerably. It seems that the spell prevented any significant damage to Mia. She remarks that it didn't hurt, but it was hot. The next moment, Mia looks up and is surprised to find that Xanamund isn't standing in front of her anymore. At first, she wonders if Xanamund ran away, but deep down, Mia knows he wouldn't do that because if he did, Veronica would surely be dead. Suddenly, a tree near Mia breaks and starts to fall on her. Veronica tenses up as she sees the tree breaking. When Mia realizes what's happening, she breaks the tree into smaller pieces before it can fall on her. However, soon after, many more trees start to break and fall toward her. Seeing this, Mia asks if it's supposed to be some sort of special tactic from Xanamund. She begins to counter the falling trees and taunts that Xanamund must have chickened out after realizing the difference in their power. She then exclaims that it's why Xanamund was hiding in the trees, declaring that all the assassins must be cowards. Suddenly, out of nowhere, an arrow flies in and pierces Mia's hand. Mia winces in pain from the arrow, and Liddy is surprised, realizing it's a magic arrow. He understands that Xanamund had been aiming for that all along. At that moment, Mia feels a surge of happiness, thinking that Xanamund messed up since she can see where his arrow came from. Without considering anything else, she jumps in that direction to attack Xanamund. But the moment she arrived, Xanamund was casting a magic circle and chanting, "O Purgatorial Drake, show your fiery power in this realm, and let your all-consuming flames feast on the flesh and blood of his life." Right after that, the attack called Dragonic Blaze struck Mia. In fact, Xanamund had a fire magic level of 41. The blaze began to burn Mia. Seeing it all, Liddy was amazed, thinking that Xanamund had intentionally cast a weaker spell to make Mia believe his magic wasn't a real threat to her. By doing this, Xanamund made Mia lower her guard and then hit her with the full force of his magic. Liddy realized that Xanamund was not only physically skilled but also magically gifted. On the other hand, Mia, now fully injured, thought it was hopeless since she couldn't move, and at this rate she might actually die. By then, Xanamund had moved behind her, and seeing this, she grew tense. Xanamund told Mia that her life as a demon was over. He then moved to strike her with his sword, causing her to panic. But just then, Liddy stepped in and asked Xanamund to wait. Hearing this, Xanamund paused. Liddy explained that Mia's body wasn't really hers, it belonged to a young villager, so if Xanamund went through with it, he would be killing an innocent girl as well. Xanamund responded with an okay and angrily asked, "What else?" Seeing this, Liddy shuddered. Xanamund then said that he could tell Liddy had an exceptionally kind heart. However, that overflow of kindness was exactly why Liddy failed to protect the princess. Hearing this, Yido thought Xanamund was right. Unlike the kid, Xanamund was a battle-hardened assassin, while Liddy had a heart and Xanamund had none. While they were discussing, Mia was trying to gather her strength and recover from her injuries. On the other side, Xanamund asked Liddy if he already knew that when a demon takes over a human body, that body is already dead. He explained that this demon Mia was a mimicry type. In other words, Liddy had fallen hook, line, and sinker for the demon's lies. Hearing this, Liddy fell silent, but Yido shouted in response that Xanamund only understood that in hindsight. Unlike him, they couldn't just cut Mia down when there was a chance the girl was still inside. To this, Xanamund asked if Mia had only tried to convince them out of concern. So if this demon were a parasite, it would have taken the body hostage from the beginning, right? Xanamund shared that he was already certain Mia was lying. Xanamund also told Liddy that he believed Liddy was Knave, both as a human and a warrior. Moreover, he reminded Liddy that he was just a mere porter, so he should know his place. At this, Yido shouted, asking what the heck was going on and why Liddy was getting a lecture from the enemy. Xanamund told Yido to be silent. Yido was stunned when Xanamund asked him to keep quiet. But soon Yido saw that Mia was trying to stand up. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Mia stood and threw a piece of rock at Xanamund, but he easily blocked the attack with his hand. Mia then jumped to attack, causing Xanamund to get ready to defend himself. But to everyone's surprise, Mia didn't target Xanamund. Instead, she ran towards Veronica. Mia told Xanamund that she would kill him another time. For now, she was only there for Princess Veronica's life. Seeing this, both Veronica and Yido grew scared. At that moment, Xanamund wondered if this was all Mia was capable of, as he had plenty of time to cast a spell. Suddenly, he saw Liddy step in front of Veronica to protect her. Mia also asked Liddy if he was ready to die. But this time, Liddy activated his supreme defense, forcing Mia back until she crashed into some trees and disappeared into the distance. Seeing this, Yido and Veronica felt happy. Liddy then said that there was no denying his naivety made him weak, and maybe he was still just a porter, which is why he continued to learn. He wanted to become the world's best adventurer as soon as possible, just like a hero. Liddy also said that adventurers needed to view the facts with a certain callousness and make objective judgments. Liddy then approached Xanamund and said that he had learned a lot from him, thanking him for the information. Xanamund didn't reply. But Yido shouted at Liddy, knowing that he was a polite guy, and asked if he wasn't forgetting something. Liddy, confused, asked, "What?" Yido yelled that Xanamund was an assassin who had come to kill Veronica. Liddy responded that he needed to learn from his enemies as well, since he was lacking in many areas. Hearing this, Ito shouted that he thought Liddy's greed was truly astounding. Ito then shouted again that it wasn't the time for joking around, as now that the pain in the butt demon was out of the way, Xanamund was coming for them. As Xanamund walked toward them, they all stood silently in tension. But to their surprise, Xanamund knelt down in front of them and told Veronica that he had come for her. The scene then shifted to some time later, where Liddy and Veronica were cooking food. Xanamund arrived and shared that he couldn't locate the demon. It likely had run away. Veronica, surprised, asked if Mia had escaped even with a wound like that. Xanamund responded that it should have been a grievous wound, but he supposed the demon possessed great vitality. Meanwhile, Liddy offered Xanamund a bowl of Moridori soup. After eating, Xanamund said it was good, and thought Liddy would make quite a good cook. Liddy responded with an okay, but added that it sucked. Ito also chimed in, saying it wasn't a compliment at all. Veronica then asked Xanamund if he would explain everything to them. Xanamund replied that what he was about to share was meant only for the princess's ears, which was why he had tried to get rid of Liddy earlier. However, Liddy found him to be at least a little trustworthy, so he decided to speak with Liddy present. Ito furiously shouted at Xanamund, reminding him that he had nearly killed them earlier and asking if he couldn't at least act a little more sorry. Xanamund then shared that he was from the Urdesh barony and belonged to a family that devoted themselves to assassinating those who opposed the royal family. He explained that even now, assassination made up a significant part of their work. Many referred to him as the noble assassin. One day, the royal family summoned him to the throne room. The scene shifted to the past, showing Xanamund entering the throne room. Upon entering, he was surprised to see an unknown person and wondered who that person was and why he was sitting on the throne as if it were made for him. Flora then stood up and told Xanamund that she ordered him to kill the first princess, Veronica. At this, Mac laughed and asked Xanamund if it wasn't surprising that a princess was asking him to kill another princess. Xanamund responded that he was the shadow of the royal family and did not carry unnecessary emotions. Flora praised him for his statement and offered him a letter. Seeing the letter, Xanamund asked what it was. Flora replied that it was a travel permit, explaining that Princess Veronica was currently in Thikar, so he needed to make his way there quickly. Flora also mentioned that if Veronica chose to stay in Thikar, that was fine, but if she attempted to leave Thikar to return to Fenalicia, he had to kill her without delay. The scene returned to the present, where Veronica surprisingly asked Xanamund if Flora had really ordered him to kill her. Xanamund sat silently, not responding. Veronica then shouted that it was pure nonsense, insisting that Xanamund must have misunderstood or was outright lying. Xanamund replied that perhaps Veronica was just awfully confident about it. But killing the first princess would bring Flora closer to the throne, and he believed that motive was enough. He also mentioned that both Flora and Veronica hadn't seen each other in 5 years and that the bonds between people are fleeting. Still, Veronica shouted back that it was absolutely impossible. Hearing this, Xanamund smiled and said that Veronica was far more stubborn than she looked and quite naive as well. He mentioned that he believed it was a problematic trait for the sovereign of a nation to possess. Suddenly, Xanamund took out the letter and told Veronica that she was correct this time. Veronica, seeing the letter, curiously asked what it was. Xanamund responded that it was a note from Princess Flora enclosed with his travel permit. In the letter, Flora wrote that she would entrust her royal baron with the truth, as the palace had fallen under the control of demons. She stated that a demon disguised as a human had killed the king. Flora warned that if the first princess returned to Fenalicia, she would either be murdered or turned into a puppet. The letter suggested that Flora was attempting to become queen without a fight by marrying the princess, so assassinating the first princess wasn't his true mission. Instead, he would pretend to assassinate Veronica while helping her escape the clutches of the demons. Hearing this, Liddy interpreted that it meant Flora was trying to protect Veronica. Ito then asked if Flora was planning to sacrifice herself instead. Xanamund responded with a yes, confirming that was correct. When they all looked at Veronica, she was crying. Liddy asked what was wrong. Veronica began shouting and crying that she had failed as a big sister. Veronica shared that she had decided to study abroad for her own sake, and as a result, she wasn't in Fenalicia at a crucial time. Despite that, Flora was even offering herself up in an attempt to protect Veronica. Hearing this, Xanamund was amazed by such beautiful sisterly love. However, he had already made arrangements to hide her away. Xanamund then asked if they should go, to which Veronica shouted no, saying she must return to Fenalicia and save Flora. What do you guys think? What's going to happen in next part, as what will Toru and his friends do next? Or what is Nia's next move? Or will they uncover more secrets about their pasts?